What is up, Bitcoin miners? Good morning. How are you doing today, Will?
Doing great. How are you?
I'm going to be 100% honest with you. I had a little bit of an early morning and a late night. Had to feed the baby this morning, so I'm a little bit sluggish, but I've downed most of my coffee at this point. So maybe halfway through the podcast, I'll get the jitters and we'll be able to run with it.
Yeah, I was kind of lying too. I mean, my 2-year-old or almost 2-year-old is probably at that 2-year sleep regression thing and learned how to climb out of his crib 2 nights ago.
Nice.
And so I've been so busy this week. I haven't had time to secure that situation. So yeah, the last 2 nights have been an adventure, late nights, early mornings.
How do you even secure that situation? I mean,
well, I think we're just going to put the toddler rail on the crib, right? So it converts to a little toddler bed. Okay. And then just roll with it from there. Baby proof the room a little bit more since he can climb out and let himself out of his room now.
Well,
but yeah, it was the last 2 days have been exciting. I probably look super tired, but I'm hanging in there.
It's dad life, man. Like we're always tired. We got a million things to do, and we got to raise kids at the same time. So, it's just par for the course. I was talking with Antoine earlier before that, and he's like, "It's okay. I promise it'll get better in the future." I'm like, "Yeah, I know, but it's just something we got to deal with." So
it's like I have a 12-and-a-half-year-old and then 2 really little ones, 2 under 2 right now still. And I don't really remember this from the 12-year-old, but yeah, having 2 back-to-back, it reminds you yes, you have 2 or 3 weeks where things you kind of hit a groove and you're in a routine, and then he grows, she grows, things change. You got to reassess everything, reevaluate everything, and develop a new routine that is only going to last for 2 or 3 weeks.
Man, that happened to me literally a week and a half ago, man. Like he gets born, he's 2-3 weeks old. He's eating really well. And then all of a sudden he goes through these cluster feedings, so instead of eating just 3 ounces, now he's 3 ounces, every hour on the hour. And I'm like he won't go to sleep, and I'm freaking out. I'm I don't know what he wants. And so we're trying to figure it out. She called her mom up and she's feed him some more. And so we gave him another bottle. And I was I don't know why I didn't think of that. I don't know why I didn't think of that.
It's weird. The obvious things just kind of leave your mind when you're overtired. All of a sudden you'll be oh man, I'll just change the diaper. Oh, what do you know? It's a dirty diaper. So, just, you got to roll with it and try to keep all of those boxes that you need to check in mind. Yeah. And then, it's worth it to bring more Bitcoiners into the world.
100%. It's just worth it to have a family, once we've talked about this before, but once you change to a Bitcoin standard and you've got that lower time preference and whatnot, it gives you the ability to think about how you want to live your life. And to me, it's just family's the most important thing. So I'll take a few sleepless nights. I'll take a few cluster feedings and having to deal with the stress of, just being a dad. I'll take that if it means that I get to be a dad. So
absolutely.
All right, well, let's get into this, man. Today we've got a really cool guest. I've been talking with Antoine for a little bit on Twitter and on Telegram. He's actually helping me design a space heater for my house that's going to go above my HVAC behind the wall. So it's really cool. We're going to talk about that a little bit. Antoine is the founder of 256 Heat, and we're going to hear a little bit about his story and how he got started. So I'm really excited about that. But before we do that, I've got something to show you.
Welcome to the Mastermind Club, your ultimate gateway into the world of Bitcoin mining. Whether you're just starting out or looking to scale your operations, our vibrant community of like-minded enthusiasts is here to support you every step of the way. Join us for weekly sessions led by industry pros, where you'll exchange ideas, brainstorm strategies, and stay motivated on your mining journey. From heat management to site optimization, our monthly deep dives cover the technical know-how you need to succeed. And with access to our entire back catalog, you'll never miss a beat. But that's not all. Our members enjoy exclusive one-on-one sessions with veteran miners, plus direct access to special pre-sales and insider opportunities at Bitcoin Mining World. Ready to take your mining to the next level? Join the Mastermind Club today and secure your spot in the future of Bitcoin mining. Visit bitcoinminingworld.com or scan the QR code now. And now back to the show.
Bitcoin Mining World, Mastermind Club, guys. Join the club, learn how to mine Bitcoin, learn how to build your operations, whether you're an at-home miner or, at an industry level. Come join us. It's going to be a great time. So, Antoine, welcome to the Build a Mine podcast. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, how are you today, brother? How is it over there in Ontario?
Yeah, doing great. Getting into my busy season, which is good. Not too many people want to mine for heat in the summer, but now that it's getting cold, there's a lot of interest and, busy designing and building and planning and all the things that come with running a business in the Bitcoin space.
Yeah, definitely. It's, anytime that you're building a business outside of the Bitcoin space, there's a lot of things that you have to do and a lot of like late nights and early mornings. And then you throw on the fact that, being a dad and having other responsibilities, and also you're in Bitcoin. So, there's that whole hurdle in and of itself. So I'm sure you got a lot of things on your plate. We'll try to make this as easy and as straightforward as possible, just by having a friendly conversation. But let's kind of just dive into a little bit of your origin story, your background and your history. I'd love to just find out kind of like what drew you into Bitcoin and then, how you created 256 Heat.
Yeah, sure. So I guess it's a good place to start is my education. I was always kind of an autodidact. I like to learn things. I almost get like upset if I don't understand something, and that just drives me further down the rabbit hole on stuff. And it's an interesting personality quirk, probably hard to live with. But what it led me to was getting into an industrial design program. That's my undergraduate. I learned a lot there. It was fun working with a lot of interdisciplinary teams. We had people from engineering backgrounds, art backgrounds, and essentially we would collaborate with industry. It was a cool program. We got to collaborate with industry to solve design problems. It was co-op based, so you had to have a work placement to graduate. And I ended up working for my co-op right out of school. It was a ultra high-end, like technical office furniture manufacturer. So I was doing design and engineering for them. We would build stuff like Saudi Aramco was our client. The US military was our client. We would design desks that would be able to hold like 18 monitors for like control rooms and things like that. So that was a really interesting experience. It got me into the 3D modeling side of things, and that kind of exploded into architectural rendering. So after that co-op, I decided to kind of just freelance in architectural rendering, found a job in Toronto doing that. That's about when I became a father in 2016. And I decided I need to become more financially knowledgeable. I was caring not just for myself, but for a family. And I was financially illiterate, basically. Before that, they don't teach it in school here in Canada. And, YouTube exists, so there's no excuse not to, if you're interested, there's no excuse not to learn. So got into the stocks and bonds and macroeconomics and all that rabbit hole. And that's where I eventually found Bitcoin. Because I guess if you're looking hard enough, you should find it in the macro space. And, I had a lot of big influences at the beginning, Lynn Alden, Jeff Booth, Gigi, some of these people, even a few sentences they would utter, and it was like playing in my head, like for weeks. Like it was just so profound. It was like, people describe them as these like light bulb moments. So it was these like successive light bulb moments of like, oh, this solves that problem and this solves that. I'm really into like solving problems. So I was like, oh, this, the Bitcoin solves this. That's pretty true for a lot of things. So in Canada, we actually had an ETF before you guys in the US. We had one launched, I think, 2018. So, anything like registered education savings plan for the kids, I was loading it up with Bitcoin because I was like, this is crazy. You don't have to pay tax on something that has like a 68% annual gain. Okay. Then I got into the technical side more because I was like, I really want to understand this. Like, I really like everyone comes for the price, but they stay for the revolution, right? So I really wanted to understand more about it and what mining was. I've heard about, people mining, and I didn't understand it. So I looked into mining a bit more. Fast forward to 2022, I bought a property up north, about 3 hours away from me here in Burlington, Ontario. And it was, the whole idea there was to just throw myself into it. I learned by going headfirst at the wall, hitting the wall, making mistakes, and course correcting until I get, something manageable. And I did that with this cabin property. I guess they were growing cannabis there, and when it became legal here in Canada, they decided to sell. So I saw 600 volts on the wall. I saw 380 amps of service. And I was like, pretty sweet. And it was a really good price because it was a half acre in the middle of nowhere, like gravel road, middle of nowhere. So I decided, let's do this. So I had the local Mennonites actually build me a shed, and I rented an excavator, dug the trench, buried the Tech 90 cable, had the electrician do all the panel and the wiring, and I decided just to go for it. So I started mining, and once I had more than a few machines in there, it was pretty loud, and heat was a problem pretty quick. So it being far and it making lots of heat and noise, those were things that I had to solve for myself. So for years, I looked at solutions. I looked at firmware, software, smart PDU. I looked at so many different solutions to manage this. And, after iteration after iteration of design, I kind of landed on these like quiet, AC infinity fan based 3D printed shroud space heater type of conversions for the S19s. And they've been super robust. I love the interchangeability of it all. I love how modular it is. Compared to a lot of other mining for heat setups, it's one of the lower capital expenditures. So you can get in without spending much more, or without spending a lot compared to some of the immersion and other kits out there. So it's kind of just since 2022, it's just been iteration after iteration, trying to get these things domesticated in homes, doing some installs. And then I guess the next big thing that happened was they raised interest rates so quickly here. I was working in 3D architectural rendering, and any business or many businesses associated with real estate development they got liquidated. So a lot of bankruptcies rolled through Canada over the last year and a half. I think it's the highest on record. And that was a company I worked for was one of them. So at the end of 2023, I decided I just want to do this Bitcoin thing full time. I want to, I see how much personal benefit, societal benefit, how much it's going to benefit my kids. Like I just see so many aligned incentives. It was an opportunity I couldn't pass up. So I just put my head down and, been going hard since the end of 2023 with running growing the business, doing installations, getting the product segment up. I'm very close to releasing a CSA approved Wi-Fi PDU switch. I'm working with an engineer to get that product to market. So just head down, busy, but it's all good stuff.
I love that story, that just the explanation of everything, how you go from being financially illiterate to building a business in Bitcoin. What I notice is a lot of like similar correlations to my story. I haven't built a business or anything like that, but going through the financial landscape of like trying to understand stocks and bonds and ETFs and financial trading, finding Bitcoin through that lens, and then just kind of completely pivoting from there, going all in on the Bitcoin space and learning more and more about it. It's an incredible story of perseverance and self-taught education, and just continuing to push and strive towards bettering yourself and empowering yourself to become the person that you always want to be. And obviously that has led you to create 256 Heat, which now is how we got in contact with each other. You've been posting some really cool stuff on Twitter. You've been sharing a whole lot of like these projects, and I think there's a lot of people out there, many of our listeners are thinking about how they can integrate mining Bitcoin into heating their homes and their lifestyles. It's something that I talk about a lot. It's actually my favorite topic in the Bitcoin mining space. And so when I saw your cabinet that you put on there just recently, it is just, you know, the miner, the PDU switch, the PDU, the router, the fan, all this stuff. And it's just in this really cool, compact little box. I thought to myself, man, that's something that I need in my house. I need one of these. And so it was like, that's kind of one of the things that drew me into having these conversations with you. I don't know about Will, but I definitely want to heat my house with Bitcoin miners and solely Bitcoin miners.
Yeah, I've tried it in the past, and you know, for many reasons we frequently talk about on the show, just kind of unplugged it at some point or another, right? And you know, I think the time is coming, if not already here, where we have kind of, you know, the hardware tinkerers like yourself, Antoine, who've started to arrive finally and actually build the proper form factor for people to do heat reuse using ASICs and make it look nice and have it belong in a home and not, you know, scream at high pitches and, you know, have the fans super loud and stuff. So I'm encouraged to see it. We've talked to a number of folks who are just enterprising in that direction, and I love it. And, you know, the other thing I noticed about your story is you teach yourself a lot of different things. And even though you're a relatively new Bitcoiner, you know, like really neck deep in it for probably the past year, it sounds like, you come to Bitcoin the same way so many people, including myself, did 10 years ago or more. You come to it because you are a self-teacher, an autodidact, and then you sift your way through different interests and boom, it just falls into your lap. And I just think, you know, I'm curious why you think, I have a lot of theories, but I'm curious why you think it is that so many people who are self-teachers or self-starters end up finding Bitcoin instead of, you know, finding something like, you know, auto racing or something, you know what I mean? Like, what do you think is going on?
I think it's just some really clever designed incentives. When you look at how the Bitcoin network works from, you know, from the white paper up, from mining, it's just, you know, the incentives are to use it. The incentives are to mine. The incentives are to, you know, if you value self-sovereignty, then you understand the incentives immediately. And then the more you, like, you know, there's all these successive lightning bulb moments where, you know, mining was one of them, but also running a node was one of them. Being able to validate your own transactions, being able to run a lightning node as a routing node, extremely gratifying. You know, trying to play with like the Bolt 12 stuff is cool. It's when you understand, like that lightning experiment that I did a few years ago was like, that was like so revealing. It was like, oh, aha, this stuff really is money. You can use it for basically anything. So, you know, as you have these aha moments, you understand the incentives better, and that should motivate you to get involved in some capacity over time.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's funny. Some people, you know, I talk to diehard Bitcoiners throughout the years who tinker with Lightning, and they have the opposite reaction. Like they like the main chain much better than they like Lightning. You know, not all cases, but I tried to have a startup back in, I think, 2018 and tried to get some engineers who were super interested in Bitcoin to tinker on Lightning with me in the very early days and like experiment and, you know, build some developer tools basically for Lightning. And I could not for the life of me get them interested in it. So I've seen both sides where some people just really have the revelation through playing with Lightning, and others who kind of drop Lightning and just focus on mining or focus on Bitcoin itself on the main chain. What do you think's going on there?
You know, Lightning has so many, you can interact with it so many ways. I think it's an interface problem. I think some of the Lightning interfaces are great, and some of them you almost have to be a computer programmer to understand how to do it properly. Like now with Lightning addresses, that if you know how to use email, you can use an address and it's reusable, unlike an invoice. So, you know, as maybe early interactions with Lightning were clunkier. I know everything's always getting better, and you know, the best brains are on these problems. I think, you know, when you hear discussions or debates about how to proceed in something where there's a disagreement in the community, there's always like really well thought out, thoughts and arguments on both sides. So it's this brain power being thrown at it that's always improving it. And playing with liquid, playing with lightning, playing with volt 12, it's just getting better. These things weren't available even a few years ago. So I think it's just a constant improvement. Like cell phones kind of sucked when they came out, but everyone has one now.
Yeah, even the original touchscreen phones, like the Palm phone and stuff like that, those sucked. And then the iPhone came out right after that, right? So, yeah, you just got to stick with the technology, keep developing, keep building, especially if you're hands-on. I want to get back into talking about mining heat reuse for the sake of Trevor's house and all of that, and with the winter to come.
Yeah.
Right before we jump right there, right now, and I'm not sure what the environment for miners is like in Canada specifically, but hash price is at like an all-time low and has been very low for a while.
Yeah.
And so how are you and your mining community peers in Canada dealing with that?
So it's a really good question. So we're pretty lucky here in some regards. There's a whole bunch of incentives that are aligning to kind of benefit miners. One of them, so I'm in Ontario, and the Ontario government's power is basically regulated. It's bought at 30-year terms, and it's ubiquitous. There's no competition. Everyone has the same rates in Ontario. So what they've done is they've offered an additional pricing model that allows you to take advantage of an ultra low overnight rate, 2.8 cents per kilowatt hour Canadian. So you're talking dirt cheap power. This was to incentivize electric vehicle adoption, so people would charge at night, but it, benefits the miners just as much. So the interesting stat here, I just wrote this down because I had to look at the spreadsheets. But so if I ran with 100% uptime, I'd be paying something like 14 cents a kilowatt hour Canadian. And if I just cut 20%, so if I just went to 80% uptime, I go down to 9.8 cents a kilowatt hour. So if I just shut down during peak usage. So I needed a solution that allowed me to schedule my miners based on when it was profitable to run them, when the power was cheap. So, innovation through necessity. And so in Ontario, if you're not, clever about running your miners intermittently, you could be paying a lot more. I mean, it's 20% less uptime for 40% increase in margin.
That's okay. Yeah. And you just jogged my memory. We have talked to miners in Canada who strictly run at night, and that's kind of unique to that geography compared to other places in the world. But it's still like all these government regulations, they create new avenues and new kind of incentive designs around the rules and the prices in your local area. But Bitcoin can adapt, and that's really cool. But yeah, let's get back to talking about the heat reuse product that you've developed and help Trevor stay warm with his new baby in the wintertime here.
Yeah. So when I first started to try to understand how to run intermittently properly, I just used firmware and things to put it on sleep mode. But my cabin being 300 kilometers away, I wanted to be able to go on the beach and actually physically turn off the miner, if there was an elevated temperature or something. So the kind of big solution, the big aha moment there was the design of the Wi-Fi PDU switch. So basically it turns your PDU into like a smart PDU. But smart PDUs probably start like $1,000 US ish, and they don't have any interoperability with other kinds of Wi-Fi sensors. So once you have your PDU controlled by a Wi-Fi switch, you can integrate motion and temperature sensors to help control when your miner runs. And the Wi-Fi temperature sensors allow you to basically dictate when your miner goes off. So let's say you want to keep it at 23. So it goes off at 23 and a half and it goes on at 22 and a half. And then to elongate your duty cycle, because you don't want things to be going on and off all day. You use firmware to kind of create an asymptotic heating curve, so that the first degree and a half is done really quickly, and then the last half degree happens over like an hour and a half, because there's a startup cost. Anytime you cycle a machine, you have about 10 minutes where you're pulling power, but you're not really hashing. So you try to minimize that startup cost by elongating your duty cycle, essentially.
So, I want to talk about just like the iterations of these products. You talk about, developing this Wi-Fi PDU switch instead of buying smart PDUs because it's more cost effective. What has the process been like, developing that specific product and then integrating it over time with these different units that you've been building? Because I'm sure you've built, several of these space heaters or home heaters by now. I can't remember. I think my number on my little sheet that you sent me was like a number 11.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you've built more than that or if that's just the amount that you've sold at this point. But
Yeah, no,
let's
that's
talk
the
about
11th
that.
one this year.
Okay.
That I built. So it's and we're just getting into the cold seasons, hopefully more. But those are client jobs. I've always been tinkering with my own hardware. And you asked me about the design process for that switch. It was basically, so there's a similar product out there, but it doesn't have the L630 cables, which is what's required for mining. Your PDU has an L630 plug and your wall would have an L630 outlet. This basically just goes between the plug and the outlet, so your PDU plug and your wall outlet. And it kind of gives you that extra layer of redundancy so that you can shut your miner down from anywhere in the world, as long as your home has Wi-Fi, which it has to mine anyway, and you have a device that has Wi-Fi, then you can reboot, you can power down, you can update the schedule, you can specify a temperature for on, specify a temperature for off. And, I typically include two Wi-Fi temperature sensors, one at the intake of the miner, so just below the, either the filter or the fan, and then one in kind of like a central room, basically where your thermostat for your home would be. And what you can do is you can say if or statements to govern when your PDU is alive. And, if it's 28 degrees Celsius or hotter at the miner, or it's 23 degrees or hotter at the room, then off. So you can integrate all these kind of logical statements to govern when your miner runs. And then you can do things for, if it's like a recreational property like my cabin, you can integrate Wi-Fi motion sensors. So if there's no motion present, keep it between 10 and 15 degrees Celsius. Just keep the pipes from freezing. If there's motion, okay, now we bump it up between 20 and 22 to like a living temperature, right? So you can really get granular, and look at every single aspect of how you would want, like a whole bunch of different decisions you would use to dictate when your miner runs, not just temperature, but there's safety settings and motion, and so there's a whole bunch of things. Now that you have Wi-Fi, your PDU on a Wi-Fi circuit, you can integrate with lots of different ways.
The thing that I see being like a huge benefit for someone in my situation is, and there's a lot of people in my situation, I'm very like I'm learning about Bitcoin, I'm understanding Bitcoin, I'm learning how to play with these dashboards and with the firmware and stuff like that, but my wife doesn't. My wife doesn't understand how Bitcoin works. I mean, she understands like the things that I've explained to her and all that, but she's never, sat on a dashboard and tried to mess around with the settings, underclock and overclock, shut things on and off. And so like one of my biggest fears, which is kind of mitigated through this Wi-Fi PDU switch, is, well, what happened? I go on a lot of work trips. So what happens if I go off on a work trip for a week and something happens to the space heater? How is she going to manage this device if I'm not home? And what this kind of does is it allows me to like kind of check in on the system from a distance, from a work trip or something. She can call me and be like, hey, something's wrong with this, and I can just manually reset everything from wherever I am in the world. And that kind of just takes her out of the equation of having to mess with this stuff. And so it just makes it easier in that aspect and like more stress-free on her and myself.
Yeah, it's like the Nest thermostat experience, right? You have Wi-Fi access 24/7, and you can update it from anywhere in the world at any time. So simplifying its key. You definitely have to tune for the space, or not the well, it's volume, right? So you're looking at square footage and then height, and to determine how much volume you're heating. And you know, the rule of thumb is typically 1,000 square feet is one miner. If you're over 1,000 square feet, you should be looking to or use one of the, you know, a miner that can output 3,600 watts or more. Yeah, once you you want to underpower it essentially, because it's better to have hardware that's always trying to keep up with the demand, and then, you know, have your your actual HVAC unit kick on the coldest days than it is to have, you know, 2 units where they're not running because it never gets cold enough to actually need that much power. So, you know, right sizing your wattage requirements for your volume that you're heating is really important, and then tuning for that volume is equally important. But the cool thing is, once you've tuned, it's good year round. A lot of people don't really know this, but there's typically a fixed relationship between the ambient temperature and the chip temperature. So if you have, you know, in my designs, I fix the fan speed at a certain percentage of your total. And then you kind of control a whole bunch of these variables so that, you know, at 25 degrees Celsius in the room, you know, you're going to have a 65-degree chip temperature at 2,500 watts. So you can essentially graph these curves, and you can design a system kind of using settings that right sizes the miner for the space.
Yeah, you know, and that's why I think it's helpful with people like yourself, because I don't understand, like I could figure it out after a while, but the tuning process is something that kind of like confuses me. So, you know, I'm really glad that, you know, we're working on this project together. For people that, you know, didn't hear me in the very beginning, Antoine and I are working on a system for my house specifically. Antoine's basically building it, and I'm going to be doing all of the installation and, you know, work that is required to make it happen. But what's really cool about what he's doing for me is, you know, I have this, I think it's like, it's an 18-inch by 22-inch hole, and it goes into a cubby above my HVAC. So like there's a space back there that I can fit a miner and a bunch of other processes that allow me to have this space heater. The coolest thing about it is, once you put the plate on the wall, which Antoine is designing me a really cool plate with baffles that shove the air 2 different directions. Once you put it in the wall, like, you don't have to see it. And that was one of the biggest things that my wife was having problems overcoming, was this fact that, like, I'd set this space heater on the counter and it made noise and it was ugly, and she absolutely hated it. She hates clutter. Like, she's a Virgo, so she's always like everything has to be in the right place, in the right space, at the right time. And so every time she'd see this damn miner, she'd get a little anxiety. And so, like, we're basically like building a system for my wife. I mean, if it was just me living in the house, I'd put miners all over the fucking place. Like, it doesn't matter. But we gotta make the wife happy, because, you know, there's that age old saying, like, happy wife, happy life, and it really matters. So,
Yeah.
you know, that's just, you know, it's really cool that you're helping me do this. And, you know, for full transparency, I am paying for this system. So it's not like Antoine's just donating his time to me. Like, we are working together to do this. And I implore anybody to reach out to Antoine, because he's literally like taken all of the specs of my cabinet and the design and the space that it's going to fit in, and he's building a system that's specifically designed to go in there. And that's, you know, one of the greatest things. You've taken a huge load off of my back in order to do this. And I think, like, originally what I was going to do was just, you know, bolt an S19 inside of that space with an AC Infinity fan and just turn it on and off all the time. And now I don't have to do that. So I'm really excited about it.
Yeah. No, it's I'm really happy that I've kind of switched over. Well, since the halving, you know, prioritizing uptime is less profitable than prioritizing heating. So before the halving, all my systems would basically run 24/7, and then there was an additional 8-inch hole you had to cut in your wall to exhaust it out when it was too hot inside the house, and then when it cooled off, it would exhaust in. So there's a electric damper, there's 2 duct routes. It's just more complicated and cumbersome, not to mention you're spending like 6,500 Canadian dollars on a miner versus like the other day I'm seeing like sub $1,000 for S19Ks on marketplace and stuff. So you know, you're making half the hash rate, but you're paying a quarter to a fifth of the cost. It's really a no-brainer, especially if the intended client isn't already a miner. You know, truth be told, most of my jobs, the situation is it's someone who's been mining for years, a couple years. Since the halving, they're no longer profitable. And like I said, like 70% of the network, the total hash rate is coming from some variant of the S19. So they have this, there's all these S19s that are being unplugged everywhere because it's just not profitable to mine anymore. Well, this kind of gives them a reason to plug it in, become price insensitive because they would have had to spend that money on heating their house anyway, and just stack sats on the down low, you know, while they heat their home. It's like it's a change in mindset from like scarcity to abundance. You don't really care if you leave the door open anymore. You know, that heat's free anyway. So if you're running, you're doing it at a, you know, profitably, at least here in Ontario. So yeah, it's funny. It changes how you think about you know, heating, and like when the price pumps, you're like, let's open the windows. You know, it's like it's a really funny way to think about mining. You really stop thinking about uptime, start thinking about prioritizing heat and efficiency.
Yeah, you know, you mentioned the price of certain generations of miners being like, again, very, very low.
Yeah.
And of course, hash price is really low, but with the cost of miners being just so low, I think it presents like a marketing opportunity for businesses like yours for the heat reuse use case in and of itself. You know, you can kind of say that, you know, ASICs are on sale, clearance, dirt cheap, you know, or whatever.
Yeah.
And honestly, the time to stuff these in your home is now, because if history is any guide, and I'm curious what you think about this, Antoine, but these things are gonna, the supposedly obsolete miners for most use cases, most jurisdictions, will probably jump in price again as, you know, Bitcoin price starts to rally again.
Yep.
And even these miners that people think are, you know, on their way out, you know, that have been around for probably 3-4 years already, they probably have 2 more years of life left as soon as the price pumps and the hash price increases again.
Yeah.
And hardware costs go up again. I'm just curious, what is your kind of forecast on that? And how do you capitalize on that, you know, dirt cheap ASIC sort of marketing line?
Yeah, well, the first way I capitalize on it is anyone who's selling an ASIC, I ask them why. Because they might not realize that they already have like maybe around half the cost of a system sitting in their hands. Typically, if you have an ASIC, you've already invested in sunk costs. You have infrastructure, and you have Ethernet, and you have you know, you have these costs that you've already sunk, but now you're not mining. If you can, you know, add a few components to make something, in my opinion, profound. If you can get paid to heat, then it seems like a no-brainer. Like, especially if you have the ASIC already. And like I said, like 70% of the market is an S19, and of those S19s, the ones that are in homes, chances are they've swung out of profitability. So there's probably since the halving, it's probably a pretty big chunk of the market that's got these ASICs, and they're either looking to sell them or do something, you know, heat reusey with them, just out of necessity, because, you know, they spent $3,000-4,000 on these miners a couple of years ago, and now they're like $900, you know, $800.
Yeah, there's a new customer base out there of people who didn't, you know, who never did or don't mine in their homes, who might be interested or curious about mining and need to heat their homes.
Right.
You know, so these folks who don't have old dusty ASICs lying around that they could repurpose, they might be, I don't know. It just strikes me that there is opportunity in the bear market. And I know like 3 of my questions to you have been about why hash price and, you know, equipment prices being low and where we are in the cycle, the price cycle of Bitcoin. But there's opportunity no matter what time it is in the Bitcoin cycle. And I think this is one of those for, you know, folks who are interested in mining, who have never mined before, don't have easy access readily to any old ASICs or whatever, and need these kinds of, you know, retrofitting and just, reuses for the equipment and can still stack sats.
Yeah.
And not to mention, Will, I was just having a conversation with a friend of mine the other day, and he's in mining. He's over there in Ohio, and he was asking me about whether it would be a good idea to buy an S9 to just solo mine. And I said, well, why would you buy an S9 when you can get an S19 you can get an S19J for like $300 right now? And then you get a Loki board from Zach Baumsta for like $40. You get an APW 3++ power supply for another $40. You're in it like $400, and now you've got a much more not profitable, but much more more efficient at-home miner that you can just plug into the wall. And he was like, "Wait, I can make an S19 like 110 volts," and I'm like, absolutely. So like there's this whole new like customer base that you now have the ability to take these old out of date machines and kind of retrofit them even more, so they actually plug in anywhere you want. And if you're using it for the heat reuse, it's like there is a whole new like cut of the pie that can be like that the machines can go to. And I think that's a great thing for a lot of people. These S19s are going to be around for a while. I really believe that.
Yeah.
Oh, he dropped out. Where did he must be having issues with his computer. That's okay. But yeah, no, that there's this whole customer base that the S19s are going to be reused for, especially in the heat sector.
Yeah. Yeah, and they just run like, it's dead simple. There's no buttons. Which makes it easy for someone who's trying to design and build around them. They just work. So as long as you're keeping them relatively clean by either cleaning them regularly or filtering the air and cleaning them semi-regularly, there's a lot of really good reasons to modify them and kind of domesticate these things.
Yeah. You talk about filtering, and this is another reason, there's a lot of reasons for me to want to mine at home for heat, but the system that you're building for me is not just a heater. It's actually also an air purifier, because, the way that we've designed it, it's going to have this huge filter on it that's got MERV 8 rated filter material. And, for just a little context for the audience, I live in a small 800 square foot manufactured home, and there's a skirting around the bottom of it, which allows a lot of like rodents intrusion and stuff like that. And I've done my best to, clean it up and make sure that rodents can't get in there. But I've had rodents living throughout the insulation of my house and going through the actual factory, like heating ducting. And a big problem in the wintertime that I've had, the first 2 or 3 winters that we lived in the house, was every time we turn on the heater for heat, all of a sudden it pumped the air through these ducts. And there's, feces and urine throughout this stuff. So you can smell it in the house. And if you can smell it in the house, that it's just piping that infestation, basically the smell and the contaminants through the house. So what we've done through this system is basically eliminated that completely. And now I'm filtering all the air inside of my house, which, as a new father, I've got this baby, and I care about my wife as well, but I want the baby to be healthy and happy and all these things. So I don't want him breathing a whole bunch of contaminants. So that's just another like use case in and of itself that this miner is allowing me to do, is just like purify the air in a way and keep it nice and clean for my family.
Yeah, it is. It's really interesting thinking of it that way, because the what is it? AC Infinity S8 fan at 100% is moving 800 CFM. That's a lot of air.
That's a lot of air.
Yeah. So even at 60%, which is kind of a nice medium between CFM and decibels, it's quiet enough, but it's moving enough air. You're basically pulling orders of magnitude more air through that filter than any off the shelf air purifier would. So if you have you can duct into the HVAC, or you can duct straight into the the largest room or one of the rooms in your home. And because there's so much CFM moving, it tends to change the air pretty quickly. Like it almost doesn't really matter where you direct it. It's pulling so much air through the system that it changes all the air in the space pretty quickly. So for your system specifically, we're going to have dual duct routes so that it's a central location, so we can shoot the air kind of towards both ends of the house to evenly heat as much as possible. And, to be honest, dual duct routes are also, they alleviate a lot of back pressure. Well, think about, how much air moves through an 8-inch duct versus how much goes through 16 inches worth of opening. So a bunch of benefits there. But yeah, I do like I didn't really realize it until I cleaned one of the designs has an air filter. And like a couple of years ago, I opened it up after I think it was like a spring. And it was just like black. You could see right where the air was coming in. So it's working. It's pulling something out. If you have pets, especially things like that, it keeps your miners safe. You're not going to have a mosquito fry itself on your motherboard or on your hash boards. And there's the air purifying and safety, again, like dual benefit. The incentives are just for you to do something like that because it makes more sense.
Yeah, and it's a super cost effective build for me. I did have 90% of the parts just kind of lying around. Maybe not 90, maybe more like 85%. But even still, I had most of the stuff lying around. And when I got in contact with you, it was like, well, I have all these things, and you're like, well, you just need this, this, and this, and someone to design it. And I was like, well, let's get to it. Let's get on this. And
you already bought the expensive stuff, right? You bought the miner
exactly.
and the fan, so.
Exactly.
You need a few accessories to get it fully domesticated.
Yeah, and so I mean, for the audience, I think we'll have this up and running probably mid-October. I feel like that's a good time frame that we'll have it up and running. And I'm gonna do a video. Maybe we'll even bring you back to like talk about the design of it specifically. But I just want to show everybody kind of some of the systems that you've built. So I'm going to share my screen here. Let's add this to stage. So this right here is one that you've built previously. They can. I'm going to turn that off.
There's not much to hear anyway.
Not much to hear, but this is the system that you're designing for me. It'll look a little bit different, but it's a really cool system. The way that it works, how it looks, it looks really neat, very compact. You can tell that you've put a lot of effort and time into designing it and putting it all together.
Yeah, making sure the pieces were as modular and kind of Lego together as possible was key. That filter part is a little interesting at the bottom. I'm replacing the paper filter with a fiberglass one, just so it breathes a bit better. It's a little bit, it's not filtering as much, but it's going to decrease the slight amount of back pressure that's in there right now. It's a great, I like having it all in one place because, it keeps everything away from kids' hands. And I would first, put doors on these things, wood doors, so you can't see it. But I kind of like the Russian nuclear experiment aesthetic. I have a background in design, and I actually think the aesthetic is interesting, especially when it's behind glass. There's something that happens to it when you put it behind glass. It kind of looks like, it takes on that experiment. I like it though, and it's not a big cabinet, and if you have power, you've got it basically, and Wi-Fi. I'm just grabbing the Wi-Fi with a router to bounce the signal into the cabinet. So yeah, it works pretty well. I like this latest design quite a bit.
Yeah, no, that design was that was the one that got me going. Oh, I need your help. I need your help to make something pretty, because I'll tell you what, if I'd have done it, it had just been slapped in the wall, and it'd have been something that I'd have to turn on and off every single time. It really wouldn't be that efficient. I'd have all this like you were talking about how it like turns on and it takes a while for it to actually start hashing. Like it'd be a whole process, and then I wouldn't have been able to manage it from a distance. So I'm really looking forward to the design. I'm really looking forward to making it happen. It's just something that a lot of people should start taking into consideration, is that, mining for heat can be as easy and simple as you want it to be, or it can be as like in-depth and technical as you want to get into it. And so we've kind of found this like happy medium between the two things. Like, I know how to build things, I know how to like put things in places and hook it up, and you know how to design. So it's kind of like we've got the best of both worlds happening here, and I'm super appreciative of your time and your help and just making this happen. It's been something that I've wanted to have happen, since before this show started. Since I got into mining and I put my first S9 on the counter, I was like, I need to figure something out here. And so like, this is really the best of both worlds. In the very beginning, you kind of talked a little bit about like the infrastructure cost between air versus immersion and stuff. And so I kind of have like a little bit of an idea of why you think air is a better solution. But like, let's kind of expound a little bit on that. I want to hear some of your takes on why it's better for people to use air versus immersion.
I wouldn't say better. I would just say more cost effective.
Okay,
I don't want to.
better.
I have a lot of friends who are heavy into immersion, and they should be, because there's a ton of promise, especially for like industrial applications. I mean, immersion, water has a higher heat capacity than air. Heat exchangers do an awesome job of transferring into different fluids. So that's an amazing type of setup if you can afford it. I would love to be able to get into more immersion stuff, but I saw a lot of benefit can be delivered to the residential client, and especially if they're not Bitcoiners, there's a lot of hesitancy once the bill starts creeping up in cost. So there's a lot of off the shelf, no plumber experience components for air cooling methods that allow you to get into the game at a pretty low bar, and like all of Zach's tools and things, his components really make things work. The Nord board specifically, it blows everyone's mind when it's like, how I can control my AC Infinity fan through the miner with Brains firmware. Wait, what? How is the Brains firmware telling the AC Infinity fan which RPM to run at, right? So there's these like amazing, there's so much amazing work in all of his products, but that one particularly really allows the system to work and not be reliant on Brains. You can run it, you can run with stock firmware or any firmware you choose. No need to spoof the fans the old method with the little spoofers. You can just use the AC Infinity fan as you are using stock computer fans. So much innovation in that space.
That was a really fun episode for us to do. He really explained that wasn't an easy task for him to go back in and back engineer the AC Infinity fan software to work with the computer, like the ASIC computer. Like it was really cool listening to him tell that story. But it's just a bunch of computers communicating, and when you have somebody like Zach who knows how to write code and understand the language of C++ and other code languages, like that completely is out of my ballpark. I don't even ever try it because I'm just like, it's something I don't even want to get into. But he spent the time. I mean, he did that, and I think he said it took him a couple of months to really write that code and make it work. But once he did, he had this beautiful form factor on this little teeny tiny chip that just and they look really cool. When you put it on your control board, like look at that little purple board next to the green one. It's like, that's cool. So that's a pretty cool thing. But yeah, I definitely see, like, I shouldn't have said better because immersion has its own like use cases, but you definitely talk about, like, or you hear in the space that immersion costs a lot of money. I think like when I was pricing out the immersion system that I wanted to build, I think it was like $6,500 just for the micro infrastructure. That's not even including the miner itself. So, it probably would have cost about 10 grand. And we just had Nico on the podcast not too long ago. He built a immersion system in his 100-year-old house. It's a hydronic oil boiler. And so really cool system that he built. But I think he said, back in 2022, he spent like $15,000. So it's very cost prohibitive for a lot of people when thinking about immersion systems. I do like how immersion systems allow for so much more functionality. The air system is great, but I'm not going to be heating my water with this system. I'm not going to be, drying my clothes with the system, or, heating a hot tub. And what Nico did with his system is, he's got outlets. He hasn't done it yet, but he's got outlets on the system that allow him to tap into his hot water if he wants to, or maybe he puts a hot tub in the house. So those different things. But you're specifically getting at like trying to onboard the non-Bitcoiner and the non-Bitcoin miner. It's hard to do that with like a $15,000 bill. People don't want to do that. I don't know what you charge normally for the installation of this project. For me, I'll be kind of completely transparent. So it's about with me installing it and Antoine kind of helping me walk through the process of tuning it. It's costing me about $1,600, but I also have a lot of the products already. I've got the AC Infinity fan, I've got the board, I have my control board, my ASIC, I've got a bunch of different things, a PDU. So everything's kind of already there. So it was really low cost for me to get into this system on top of what I've already spent. So I think that was definitely not a huge hurdle. Like I kind of expected it, when you said, oh, I'll send you the scope of work. When I got that, I was kind of expecting somewhere between $1,500 and $2,000 was kind of my price range that I was expecting to spend.
Yeah, it's like you said, when you compare it to hydronic systems, and there is a point where hydronic makes way more sense, right? Because when you're dealing with air, you need a fan for each one, you need a shroud for each one, you need you have these components where it's iterative. Every single S19 requires this number of components. Whereas if you have like 6 miners and you have like a larger home or even like a business that has a higher capacity for heat, or a higher, more need, I guess, then you just have one tank. You can use the same heat exchanger. You can use the same routes, right? So you're not doing multiple duct routes like you are with air. So there's a point where it makes more sense to go to something hydronic. But for most homes, especially small homes and like recreational properties, cabins, things like that, one miner is more than enough. And if you're dealing with one miner, the infrastructure build is pretty insignificant, and it's reusable. Like your infrastructure, you're going to hopefully use it through generations of miners because the form factor is pretty standardized. I mean, if you're dealing with an S19J, that's still like 3 generations from where we are now, and the form factor hasn't changed. They've only kind of made, I guess, the XPs a little bit instead of the 60 millimeter shrouds, that you need the 100 millimeter shrouds or whatever, but the form factor is essentially the same. So everything can just Lego in. If you need a new miner, it's like replacing your furnace. You don't replace all the ducting, you just throw in another power source, essentially. That's how I look at them. They're programmable power sources that pay you to run them.
Do you guys think that, so, what you're doing, it's a cool hobbyist project for sure, and you both are tinkerers, and, I feel like there's like a prototype potential here with the project that you're building with Trevor. This could be, and we've seen industry crossovers with Bitcoin and other things in the past. It just strikes me like there's going to be some sort of bubbling up potentially of like the HVAC industry and Bitcoin mining crossover coming soon. I mean, talk about that. Like what's the potential for this prototype to be scaled and offered more widely, or HVAC small and medium-sized businesses start to provide this type of equipment in addition to what else they provide?
Yeah, I mean, it's huge. There's very little barriers to entry. Call me General Electric. It wouldn't be hard to replace like a typical furnace with a couple ASICs, and making sure that you have the design is in place to make sure you have enough air moving through them, and have that kind of smart Wi-Fi operability. It's kind of a no-brainer, right? Like you can pay an electric bill to make heat, or you can pay an electric bill for compute that pays you, and then you get the heat for free. So, if you have these companies competing on HVAC systems, think about how much, they can deliver, how much value they can deliver to their end client if they can integrate some sort of revenue stream into their model for their clients, right? I mean, you could have, we've been talking about this in a few chat groups. You could have General Electric pool. You could have, they could actually have their own pools set up, because if they have so many units out there and everyone's mining while they're heating, you could change the hash rate, how it's distributed, right? If every appliance that requires low grade heat can now have compute and low grade heat, then I don't see why not. I think it's going to be a trend. And even like things like you guys ever notice how, like, since AI has become a big trend, the whole Bitcoin power FUD is gone. So that there's a lot more willingness to look at it as like a social benefit. So this might play into these companies getting on board with it. It was first seen as like extremely bad thing for society, but now once people are A, understanding it, and B, realizing it's every large tech company is investing in compute, which uses the same resources that any Bitcoin mining operation uses. So I think as it becomes more palatable, maybe we'll see some smarter companies integrating compute into their heating systems.
That's a really interesting point. Yeah, it really, the FUD against Bitcoin mining being, bad for the environment really seemed to synchronize with just the mainstream awareness of AI and, the demand for electricity, that growing the AI capabilities and all these companies growing and building out AI divisions and stuff. I didn't realize that before. I guess I naively assumed we had successfully busted that FUD as Bitcoin community, but no, that's fascinating. I think you're right. There is a wider acceptance amongst society and even, the green crowd for how AI can be used to help the environment, even though it consumes such a great deal of electricity.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And I love the incentives for, developing stranded energy assets in countries like, in places like Africa and in certain countries within Africa. They're really, there's a lot of investment going into like Ethiopia for stranded energy assets. So now, these assets these companies have a buyer of last resort, and they can use that cash flow to develop the infrastructure so they can eventually serve society. So there's so much positive social associated with mining. As that FUD evaporates, I think we'll see more and more academics kind of writing about the benefits, and more companies engaging in these benefits and seeing the incentives and delivering more value to their customers by taking advantage of these incentives.
Yeah, and this just gets the wheels turning again about how mining for heat reuse enters the commercially, an increased demand commercially for like a solution to heat your home. And I just, it's interesting how that sales pitch might go. It's probably not going to be a heavy Bitcoin sales pitch, but it might be similar to how solar is distributed residentially now, where it's like you're going to have a surplus of energy that you sell back to the grid, and they're going to pay you certain, at certain times or certain seasons. And, not only do you save money and you're environmentally friendly, but you also can make some money. And yeah, it's just interesting how that sales pitch might develop, and that units like you guys are developing could become commonplace.
Yeah. I think that, I'm all for the home heat reuse. I think that home heat reuse is something that it needs to be spoken about, and that's why we talk about it. But, something that Tyler Stevens had mentioned the other day when I was on just a chat with him and a couple other guys, it's not home heat reuse that's really going to change the commercial aspect. Like, the commercial aspect is going to be in the business heat reuse, because businesses have access to tax incentives, to write-offs, to business loans, to all these different things that allow them to take on that heavy cost. We talk about how a lot of home miners and people who own homeowners are not going to spend $15,000 on a hydronic heat reuse system, but a agricultural business or a farmer or any other business who needs to use heat in the processes of their business will be willing to spend, $15,000-$20,000 to integrate some sort of heat system that saves them, 40% over, the lifetime of the system. So I think there's, while we're talking about heat reuse a lot, I think there's this whole other side of like businesses that are going to be really like changing the pace for us and decentralizing out even more faster than, home miners.
Yeah, like the juiciest use cases are not using, Bitcoin mining for heat to save money. They're using Bitcoin mining for heat to make a product to earn even a larger margin on your capital. So if you have a business and a large percentage of it is going to heat, and like I think 25% of all power generation is for heating. So if you have a business that requires heat to make a product, whether it's a car wash or there's a whole bunch of interesting ones, paint booths, that's where the most benefit for Bitcoin mining for heat can be delivered, because you're not just saving money, you're taking that money that you're saving and you're even turning around and making a profit on the product that you created by mining Bitcoin. So there's like this triple benefit where it was only a double if you're just heating residentially.
Yeah, you mentioned something. You said a paint booth, and this made me have this thought. So I used to be an automotive painter, and there's a heat cycle for painting cars. So when you're currently spraying the paint, it's like 80 degrees, which could be completely manageable by a Bitcoin miner at this time. But when you're baking the paint, you have to get up to like, I think it's like 150, 160 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's pretty hot. So what do you see happening in the future with, these chip manufacturers? Do you see them kind of opening up the market to building chips that can sustain higher heat? So they're not chasing the efficiency of the chips. They're not chasing the, condensed nature of them, but they're actually chasing like a higher heat temperature and a higher heat variance. What do you see?
Yeah, totally. I think even the S9 was like, it could do 100 C. So you could almost boil water with it. Or at least like that was the upper threshold of, acceptable mining temperatures. But I think that, if we can switch from low grade heat to high grade heat, it will open up all these other windows for use cases. Personally, I'll stick with low grade heat. I don't need to torch anything. I'll leave that to the, if you guys want to use immersion for high grade heat stuff, that's awesome. But I think with air, it's probably at this time a risky endeavor. Just any component heating up that hot, I wouldn't really. I mean, your furnace literally makes fire in your house, and while you get a lot of pushback about, is it safe to have a Bitcoin miner in your home? It's like, it's computer. You literally have fire in your basement right now. But the high grade heat thing, it'd be great. But again, like just using thermodynamics, when the more heat you have, the more resistance in your circuitry. So there's like a happy medium, you want to keep your board at around 60 Celsius. And, like you said, you probably could hash at a high grade heat level, 100 C or more, but who knows if it'll be as efficient. And, profitability still matters. Like that is the biggest incentive to mine, right? Firstly, not like profit, but in terms of like what you earn. And, it's hard to see buying new hardware that's not going to be or maybe it will be as efficient. I don't know. I just know that, once you start creeping up into the 80 degrees Celsius range, the efficiency plummets. And I know that the new S19 or S21 XPs are extremely heat sensitive. You lose like 2 joules per terahash just going between like 23 and 26 degrees Celsius ambient. So I'm not sure what the implications are, but it would be cool, and it would open up a whole bunch of doors. And first to market will probably clean up because there's no other alternative right now to mine high grade heat. So it's an interesting thought.
Yeah, it is. I don't know. I'm not going to be the guy that says where it's going to go. I can't tell you, how that would look like trying to get chip manufacturers to work on that project.
Yeah. That's a Tyler Stevens question.
Exactly. It really is. And when we get him on the podcast, we'll talk about that because, I want to know what his thoughts are on it more in depth and, how that's going to look. But right now, it's just like most of the heating that we're doing, like my project that you and I are building, is like, I'm only going to use this thing like 3 or 4 months out of the year. and it's really not going to get used for anything else. And I don't plan on it. I've basically designed or had the idea in mind that it's only going to be used for these specific months. And maybe if I want to keep purifying the air, maybe I could just, duct it up and out, or figure out another method altogether. I don't know. I'm not sure exactly. But at the end of the day, it'd be a lot cooler and be a lot more beneficial for my life if, there was a way to use something to heat my dryer, something to, boil water or cook food. But I don't know what that looks like. So
Yeah, that's probably the next generation. As the HVAC heater type of space heater unit is an obvious one, but there's so many hair, like you said, hair dryer. I mean, every beauty salon could have an S19 behind the chair, every chair, right? And when you think about it, it's because when you run these things in your house, you walk past the stream of air and you go, oh, I could use it for this. Oh, I could use it for that. I could make beef jerky with it. There's that low grade heat, while it doesn't have as many applications as anything over 100 Celsius, ton of applications still, just from like a comfort perspective, just making for climate control or interior climate control, right?
Yeah, 100%. Well, we're going to start wrapping this up. I have a question that I'd like to ask you. I ask everyone this question, and I love the wide range of answers that we get. And as someone who came to Bitcoin at a very pivotal time in your own life and similar to my life, I'm just curious what your answer is going to be. So, Antoine, what does Bitcoin mean to you?
It really starts with self-sovereignty. And being able to store your labor in a medium that can't be debased, confiscated, any of especially here in Canada, we see how easy it is if you hold your assets in the traditional financial system, how easy it is to get your assets, confiscated or taken away from you. So there's so many incentives, especially in the third world and in other places. But, as time goes on, I think those incentives will become, more universal. Everyone's going to have the same, capital problems. Everyone's going to be trying to stem capital flight. So they're going to come down even harder on the citizenry. So that sovereignty it gives you to, just as an asset. And then the second half of that, other than the financial, is just it's the network is so interesting, how difficult the adjustments are done, and it's an interesting technology. So personally, it's what I'm building my business around, just because I think it provides the humanity with a future that is sustainable in terms of if there's inflation going on and it's disincentivizing savings, that makes people take on debt. And if you look at the WTF happened in 1971 chart, we know where this will end, right? It's every country has the same death spiral. So being able to, the lifeboat analogy is a good one, and Saifedean and Jeff Booth and these guys really go into it in detail. And once you understand that, I think that's what it means to me. It's that lifeboat from the technical, but also from the financial and sovereign side. It's it kind of does. It touches on so many interesting aspects of life.
Yeah, I completely agree. I see it very much in the same light. I had Nico ask me this question last time he was on, and I kind of want to ask you just because it correlates really well. Where do you think that your life would be if you didn't have Bitcoin?
Oh, it's really hard to imagine, just because like since 2019, it's kind of been a focus. And now since 2023, it has been, my full-time primary focus. So where would my life be? I'd probably still be doing something technical, engineering related, design related, maybe computer graphics related, but it would only scratch one of the many itches I have, in life to deliver value. And the whole concept behind Bitcoin and the incentives behind it, they do such a good job. So it's hard to imagine. I would probably be doing something where computer graphics, engineering related, but not getting nearly as much out of it.
Yeah, for sure. I think a lot of us we can kind of see the same pattern. I think without Bitcoin, I know for a fact, and this is what I had mentioned on the podcast last time with him, is that if I didn't have Bitcoin in my life playing a pivotal role, I don't think I would have made the decision to like want to start a family,
Yeah.
which is something that, ever since I was a kid, I would see my grandfather and just the way that he reacted and acted around his family, and like family was his everything.
Hmm.
And so like I remember being a kid and thinking to myself like that's what I want when I grow up. Like I want to be the grandfather that has like the grandkids running around and just playing and the dogs barking, and just that's the life that I always wanted to live. And so before Bitcoin, it was hard for me to like imagine settling down and like building a family. And then Bitcoin comes into my life, and it's like starting a family is a no-brainer, so I really, I'm grateful for Satoshi and for all the people who have built out the network and who are continually building it out. I'm grateful for people like you and Will and Scott and everybody who's just helping me along this journey of finding my self-sovereignty, my independence. And I think it's a beautiful thing that other people really need to like hop on board.
Yeah, absolutely. One way or another, it's going to happen. So it's, I think it's an inevitability. So the sooner you get into it, but maybe, who knows, maybe it'll strike something in you that, you've been looking for. So as it has for me. So I would advise people to make mistakes, get in there and play. Don't do anything dangerous, but experiment. You can learn a lot just by plugging things in, checking out numbers, making spreadsheets, changing settings. Just get your hands dirty.
Absolutely. That's great advice. Well, guys, this has been the Build a Mind podcast. I am grateful to all of you as well for following us on this journey, for watching, listening, and paying attention. Please send us your comments, send us your feedback. I am always looking for that criticism to help me build and grow and make this better. And then also, if you ever want to get in contact with us, please reach out. We'd love to help you build your own system. Antoine, where can people find you, and how can they get in connection with you if they want to have you help them build a system as well?
Yeah, check out my website at 256heat.com. And I guess Twitter is the only social media I play with. So it's at TronMonGon. I know all the good ones were taken. It was kind of a weird nickname from way back in the day, and I just didn't really think about it too much before I got in there. So, but I post a lot of content about my designs, and I do a lot of tests, and I divulge results. And if it helps people, then that's awesome, because I learned a lot from podcasts like you guys and other YouTube channels, almost exclusively. There's not a lot of literature out there on the topic. So yeah, thank you guys for doing the YouTube thing, and all the creators out there that share their knowledge. It's super helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. We're happy to do it. We're happy to spread the value and the signal. So, all right, guys. Well, we'll see you next time.
Thank you. Adios. See you later.
Please note, the Build a Mind podcast provides information for general educational purposes only. This information should not be construed as legal, financial, or investment advice. We do not guarantee the accuracy or completeness of any information presented, and we encourage you to consult with a professional advisor, legal advisor, and/or financial advisor before making any financial decisions. The Build a Mind podcast and its affiliates are not responsible for any losses incurred as a result of using the information provided.